Welcome everyone to another edition of the Classic Comic Archive, a series where I recap and review many of Marvel Comics' most seminal early issues. Our story for today is Fantastic Four, cover dated May of 1962. This issue marks the first appearance of Namor the Submariner in the Silver Age of comics. The issue was written by Stan Lee and drawn by Jack Kirby. Our issue opens up with a striking splash panel, showing the Fantastic Four as they're speaking to one another within their skyscraper headquarters. But notably absent is Johnny, who'd angrily quit the team after a heated fight with the Thing in the last issue. While Reed wants to go out and find him, the Thing thinks that they should just let him go. He's totally fed up with dealing with the teenager, and is glad that he's quit. Sue is appalled that the Thing would say something so nasty about her brother, and frantically worries that Johnny might be in danger. While Reed doubts this, he's just as upset with the Thing as Sue is, and bitterly blames him for Johnny's exit. For some context, Reed takes a moment to recount the events of last issue, in which the fiery teenager almost single-handedly defeated the Miracle Man. So Reed accuses the Thing of being jealous of him, and demands that he help in finding him. While the Thing doesn't accept responsibility for his exit from the team, he does agree to help search for Johnny, although only to punish him for leaving. So the issue shifts forwards a few minutes later, as the three heroes are boarding their flying Fantasticar. To split up, it separates into 4 sections, one for each member of the team. Sue first decides to travel to the center of town, an area that teenagers often frequent. To avoid bringing attention to herself, she opts to turn invisible, and then heads into a nearby diner. But oddly enough, she's not there to find Johnny, she's there to take a quick soda break. But she forgets to return visible while drinking, and accidentally scares away a teenage customer. In any case, the issue then shifts focus to Mr. Fantastic, who brazenly yanks a motorcyclist off of his bike, and asks him if he's seen Johnny. The cyclist hasn't, so Mr. Fantastic lets him go, and leaves to ask some nearby baseball players. But little does he know that Johnny is only a mile away at a nearby garage. He's begun working as a repairman, and is currently welding machine parts with his flame powers. But little does he know that the Thing is just outside the garage, searching for him. While there's no windows for the Thing to peer through, he can feel the excess heat emanating off of Johnny, and thus realizes that he's found him. So he rather dramatically crashes his way into the garage to teach Johnny a lesson about deserting. But this time the teenager can't fight back, as if he flames on, he'll accidentally ignite gasoline within the garage. So there's nothing to stop the Thing from mightily hoisting up a nearby car that he's seemingly going to throw at Johnny. But despite his livid anger, the Thing knows better than to do that, and instead tosses it out of the garage to make room for their real battle. And so it begins, as the Thing first tries to squeeze the life out of Johnny, but the nimble teenager is too quick for his lumbering arms, and manages to duck under them. But he's not fast enough to dodge the Thing's second move, as he presses him against a wall until he's tightly cornered. This time there's nowhere to run, and it really seems that Johnny's been defeated. But just as the Thing is about to deliver the harsh punishment he'd promised, he suddenly and involuntarily transforms back into Ben Grimm. But this is what the Thing had been praying for ever since their accident in space. A chance to become normal again. So he practically forgets about his battle with Johnny, and delights in the prospect of having his old life back. While certainly a touching moment, Johnny just wants to get the heck away from Ben, and flies away as soon as he can. And he couldn't have timed it any better, as just as he leaves, Ben rather tragically transforms right back into the Thing. But with that, the issue shifts forward a short time later, as Johnny's arrived in New York's Bowery, a derelict neighborhood home to the city's neglected masses, where no one will come looking for him. While Johnny's not quite sure what he's going to do there, he figures he ought to find a place to stay first. So he books a bed in a nearby hotel, and takes a moment to rest after his weary day. To pass the time, he starts reading an old comic book he'd found lying around. It's from the 1940s, and features tales of the legendary Submariner, one of the world's first superheroes who fought the Axis powers in World War II. But as famous as he was, not a lot was known about him. All that Johnny knows is that he lived underwater, and was as strong as 10 men. As to what happened to him after the war ended, no one really knows. But it's then that one of the hotel's tenants notices that Johnny's reading the comic, and tries to introduce him to an old man, who he says is just as strong as the Submariner. But the disheveled old man is tired and confused, and just wants to be left alone. So he tells the tenant to bug off, but the tenant is rudely persistent and tries to get him to rip a phone book in half. This obnoxious badgering ticks off the old man, and he retaliates by swatting away the tenant and calling him a puny flea. But this doesn't go down well with the other tenants, who leap to their pal's defense and begin brawling with the old man. And so it seems that he truly is as strong as the Submariner, as he rather easily beats them up. But it doesn't seem that he's in the mood for a fight, as he abruptly stops the brawl and sits down to think. It turns out that he's an amnesiac, who's even forgotten his own name. But the angry tenants don't care about that, and grab a bunch of crude weapons to beat the memories back into him. Luckily for the old man, they're stopped by Johnny, who finally intervenes and offers to help him regain his memories. So he first decides to remove the old man's shaggy mop of hair and overgrown beard, in the hopes that he'll recognize his own face. So he ignites one of his fingers and carefully burns the hair away. While the old man doesn't react to the sight of his bare face, Johnny immediately recognizes it as none other than the Submariner's. But before we can explore this shocking revelation any further, the issue shifts focus to Mr. Fantastic, who's stretched up to a helicopter and is asking its pilots if they've seen Johnny. They unsurprisingly haven't, so he then stretches onto a passing train and asks its riders the same question. But they give the same answer, so the issue ditches Mr. Fantastic's fruitless search and shifts focus to one with more potential. It's the invisible girl, who's decided to search for Johnny in the Bowery. But after what seems like only a few seconds of searching, she decides to turn around, as she doesn't think that Johnny would be desperate enough to settle there. She's of course dead wrong, as he's actually on the very same block as her. But regardless, Johnny leads the Submariner out of the hotel and then to the ocean, in the hopes that it'll jog his memory. And sure enough, as soon as he's submerged underwater, the proud Prince of Atlantis remembers who he is and hastily returns to reunite with his people. But when he arrives in Atlantis, he tragically finds that it's been destroyed and abandoned. All that's left is an unnatural radioactive glow that the Submariner blames on humanity's unrestrained nuclear testing. This of course enrages him, and he quickly returns to the surface and declares that he's going to get revenge on humanity. Realizing what he's accidentally unleashed, Johnny begrudgingly shoots out an emergency flare and summons his teammates. But by the time they arrive, the Submariner has already fled back into the depths. He's traveling to an undersea location known only to the Atlanteans, that being the nest of the sleeping Giganto. He claims that the monster is the largest living thing on Earth and awakens it with the blow of a mighty horn. It's now under his control, and he leads it straight back to New York City. But it's a massive lumbering creature, and it's spotted by a small boat while it's still in the deep ocean. So, its crew sends out an emergency warning and gives the authorities time to prepare for its arrival. But in an unprecedented move, they call for the complete evacuation of New York City. Only the army is allowed to stay, and they prepare for Giganto's arrival by setting up a line of artillery along the shore. But this measure ultimately proves useless, as when it does, it's completely unharmed by the shelling. Thus it seems that the city's only hope is left with the Fantastic Four, who've evidently ignored the evacuation order. But they can only hope to slow it down, as Mr. Fantastic boards the Fantastic car and releases a screen of smoke to confuse it. This only works for so long, and although he doesn't know what he's going to do to help, Johnny decides to flame on and fly up to the beast. But before he can do anything to it, it manages to blast him away with a torrent of water from its blowhole. This massive gush extinguishes his flame, and sends him plummeting to the depths below. He's luckily saved by Mr. Fantastic, but with the two momentarily distracted, the Submariner briefly emerges from the ocean and commands Giganto to crash into the city. So it does, using its massive head to ram into countless city blocks. So it seems that the Fantastic Four have failed, and that the city is doomed. But the Thing comes up with a novel idea, and races to a nearby army depot which houses a nuclear bomb. Amazingly, he manages to convince its guards to hand it over, at which point he straps it onto his back and heads off to confront Giganto. When he finally reaches it, he finds that it's resting with its mouth agape. This is exactly what the Thing had been hoping for, as he simply walks into its mouth and then deep into its stomach. Armed with nothing but a flashlight, the Thing travels through Giganto's cavernous belly and stumbles onto countless shipwrecks, each dating back centuries. But Giganto doesn't just eat ships, he also eats fellow sea monsters. And it seems that a few of them survive their would-be digestion, as one ugly monster suddenly springs out and begins attacking the Thing. While he manages to defeat it rather easily, by the time he's done with it, he only has a few seconds left to escape Giganto before the bomb detonates. So he races out as fast as he can, and although he doesn't escape in time, he's far enough away to be harmlessly blasted out by the explosion's shockwave. He does land rather harshly back on the surface, but ultimately walks it off to fight another day. Except that he's not done fighting this day, as it's then that the Submariner emerges before the Fantastic Four, and reveals that Giganto was just one of countless monsters he can summon from the depths. But he makes the mistake of revealing that he needs his horn to do so, so the Invisible Girl simply sneaks up from behind him and yanks it right out of his hands. But the horn isn't invisible like she is, so the Submariner simply races after and tackles her. But as she's in his arms visible once again, the Submariner's suddenly overcome by an infatuation for her. He's in fact so enthralled that he offers to cease his war against humanity, but only if she becomes his bride. The Invisible Girl struggles to make a choice, but she doesn't have to, as Mr. Fantastic speaks up and denies the offer for her. The Submariner obviously doesn't take kind to this, and angrily declares that he'll force her to be his bride, and still get his revenge. He promises to unleash a horde of monsters so powerful and overwhelming that humanity will be forced to live as cavemen once again. Hearing this, the Invisible Girl decides that she has no choice, and tells the Submariner that she'll become his bride if it means saving humanity. But her teammates just won't let that happen, so they stop wasting time and attack the Submariner. But he's stronger than they'd thought, and easily swats them away. Realizing that it'll take more than brute force to take him down, the Human Torch flies high above the Submariner, and begins whizzing around in an ever-expanding circle. Amazingly, this motion creates a powerful tornado that sucks up the Submariner and knocks him unconscious. The torch then maneuvers the tornado to the deepest part of the ocean, and casts away the Submariner. And although the villain awakens only moments later, he'd lost his horn while unconscious, never to be found again. The issue subsequently ends as the Submariner ultimately abandons his crusade, but vows to one day get his revenge. That concludes Fantastic Four 4, and another episode of the Classic Comic Archive. But as always, I would like to offer a brief review of this issue. Overall, I thought that this was a great story, perhaps the best of the series so far. The Submariner was just such a fun and exciting villain. I commend Marvel for finding a way to not only bring back a Golden Age hero, but also reinvent him to fit the new era of comics. I'm thus excited knowing that this is only one of many further appearances he'll make, in practically all of Marvel's major titles. But as for the Fantastic Four itself, I'm glad that this issue gave each member something to do. A gripe I had with issue 3 was how lopsided each member's contributions were. It seemed that the Human Torch was pretty much doing all the work, while someone like the Invisible Girl did practically nothing. This issue did a better job of giving each hero a chance to shine, such as when the Thing carried in the bomb, the Invisible Girl stole the horn and offered to become the Submariner's bride, and when the Torch ultimately defeated him. But in any case, let me know what you thought of this issue and the video, and feel free to suggest other classic comics for me to cover. Thanks for watching.